Trump aides, including the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, and the CIA chief, John Ratcliffe, have now set to face tough questions from the U.S. senators at a high-stakes intelligence hearing. Now in Washington, top Trump aides face tough questions from the U.S. senators at the annual Global Threats hearing, with the spotlight firmly on the Iran war now in its third week. The hearing comes just after the resignation of the counterterrorism official Joe Kent, adding to the pressure on the administration, while the Democrats have sharpened their attack, calling the conflict as a war of choice and demanding greater transparency on the strategy and intelligence behind it. Now, as the spotlight sharpens on Washington, all eyes are now on President Trump's core intel team, the key figures shaping America's national security and strategy amid the ongoing war. First up is Tulsi Gabbard, currently who is the director of the National Intelligence, a former congresswoman from Hawaii and an Iraq war veteran who has served in the National Guard. She remains as a key voice on the intelligence and the foreign policy front. Then there is John Ratcliffe, the director of the Central Intelligence Agency, a former director of the National Intelligence and ex-congressman from Texas, and a close Trump ally. Ratcliffe is known for his strong stance on national security. Then we talk about the cost of the ongoing war, which seems to be staggering, and the numbers are now piling up. And this raises serious questions because the overall estimated cost seems to have crossed already over $200 billion, that is roughly around 17.43 lakh crore rupees. In just the first 24 hours, the US is believed to have spent over $700 million, or about 6,900 crore rupees. And even before the strikes began, the military buildup alone costed around $630 million, or over 5,000 crore rupees. And the expenses continue to mount, especially when it comes to the operation of USS Gerald R. Ford. Of one day alone, it cost nearly 58 crore rupees. Now, in a major development, the director of the Counterterrorism Center, Joe Kent, has stepped down, citing strong objections to the ongoing Iran war. And in his resignation, Kent said that he's decided to step down as the counter-terror chief, and he could not support the war in good conscience, asserting that Iran posed no direct or immediate threat to the United States of America. He's further claimed that the conflict was triggered by pressure from Israel. Well, President Trump has hit out at the former counterterrorism chief following his resignation over the Iran war, dismissing him as weak on security. And responding on Kent's exit, Trump said that he always thought Kent was a nice guy, but maintained lacked when it comes to toughness that is required on national security. In fact, he had posted an old tweet on part of Joe Kent, where he seems to be propagating for a war on Iran.
Mr. President, your Director of National Counterterrorism, Joe Kent, he just resigned today. He said he can't support your conflict with Iran. What's your reaction to that? And did you talk
Well, I read his statement. I always thought he was a nice guy, but I always thought he was weak on security, very weak on security.
Now, as far as the development is coming in, the FBI that seems to be investigating the former National Counterterrorism Center Director Joe Kent over the alleged classified information leaks, with probe predating his resignation, according to sources, what we are learning. Kent, who stepped down on Tuesday, citing opposition to the U.S. war against Iran, and now FBI has come in, especially when it comes to investigating what they have been calling as alleged leak of information. Kent's exit has now followed a lot of policy disagreement as well, where the U.S. security official now seems to be under investigation. Well, that is the development that is now coming across, as the FBI now seems to be probing the former counter-terror chief. Well, what does it mean, Srinjoy, with the coming in of the FBI? Because they want to investigate Joe Kent over why, in a way, he seems to be having a different opinion altogether, but now there seems to be another angle of alleged classified information leaks.
Well, he's let the side down. He has resigned in the middle of a war. 18 days into the war, he felt it wasn't the right thing to do and resigned. Now, that has naturally led to a serious unhappiness within the government. How can your counter-terror chief resign halfway through a war? Which is why, and again, speak about his differences with the government and say what he's had to say about this Iran war. Naturally, it has led to quite a lot of unhappiness within the government. And now there's an effort to see if he or his office or his people have leaked any documents, classified documents.
Yes.
And that investigation is currently going on.
Yes, and this has been prompted on part of the FBI to probe Joe Kent, and as far as alleged leaks are now concerned, is something that the investigation now will take place. But Srinjoy, we'll just play out your conversation that you had with Professor Erica Verhoeven of the Columbia University, who has now also weighed in on the Iran war, saying that there is significant opposition of the conflict as well within the United States, where he seems to be suggesting that the decision to go to war was driven by small groups of policymakers rather than a broad public consensus that seems to have not been taken by the Trump administration.
Professor Verhoeven, you're professor of economics at Columbia University in New York. This war has lasted 19 days, and we don't know when it's going to end. Petroleum prices at that time, when the war began, was about $70 per barrel of crude oil. Now it's over 100. How bad can it get?
Sadly, it can get worse. The prices can go up even more. I'm hoping, as so many other people are hoping, including in my own country, that the war ends quickly. I think it was a bad idea to begin with, and it's causing great havoc, right? Both not just in the region, but also in other places through rising costs. That India's GDP falls when oil prices rise, and so I hope that it resolves quickly. I think the bigger issue is how can India, as a country, reduce to some extent its reliance on oil supplies, and hopefully it would accelerate the green transition to some extent in this country.
Yes, it's been said that if this war took place in 2035, then many countries would be less badly affected. But that said, apart from the fact that India imports about 80% of its oil, and a large amount of it comes from that area, besides that, 9 million Indians live in the area. Remittances are about $50 billion a year. That's a fair whack.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, in the very short term, I think India's options are limited. India didn't start the war. It was a bystander, but now is feeling the collateral damage of the war. So to the extent that India can act, I think it's going to be more in the longer term, in reducing the reliance on foreign oil, in transitioning to greener sources of energy. In the long run, clearly, that's going to be a good idea, to be less reliant on oil as a resource and on the geopolitical situation, which may be unstable now for a while, even if the war itself is resolved or ends quickly.
What if the war carries on for another month? It's not just going to hurt India. It's going to hurt other countries like Japan, like China, like many countries, South countries, particularly with large populations like Egypt. But India would be hurt. First of all, 9 million Indians in the area, remittances. Also, countries like the UAE have been investing in India. A lot of FDI comes from the Gulf to India. All that is going to stop.
Yeah. All I can say, I think the message that I would carry to India is that there are many people in the U.S. who don't support the war, that this was a choice made by a small number of people in the administration that unfortunately have power over the government, but that it's not widely supported. It's quite unpopular even within the United States. And I think that there will be pressure. There is pressure now to change the tack of the war, but unfortunately that also may not happen. The pressure may not be able to change direction, get the government to change direction right away. Right? This will may take several months.
Also, it's said that if fuel prices go to $5 a gallon in America, the American people start getting very upset. And that could be something the president will have to keep in mind.
Absolutely, even before $5 a gallon. Already it's pushing, I think, in some places $4 per gallon, and that's already, it's being noticed. It's quite widely perceived, and there are midterm elections coming up, which will be quite important in the United States in terms of the direction that happens even for the next 2 years of the Trump presidency. So if it's true that, and I think the gas prices are predictive of voting patterns, that prices remain high through the midterms, I think that you'll see that it will have an effect, at the ballot box, and then that in turn would then have a very constraining effect. If it doesn't go, if it doesn't, the results are not very supportive of Trump and of the Republicans, I think you'll find a change of tack in the government, that many in the party will realize that they're paying a political cost for supporting these kind of adventures that Trump is leading the country into.
Well, whose war is it? The question still remains. 20 days into the war, and there still seems to be no sign of any de-escalation. Back after a short break.